Kia ora, ko Alice tōku wingwa. Welcome to Oasis Scents. Oasis Scents is my small business based here in New Zealand, which is what this video is all about. We make soap, candle, other related scent products and a few other things. Everything we create is inspired by fandoms or nerdy things. I absolutely love science fiction and just any general nerdy things, so that is what the business is based about. And this video is about some tips and tricks that I wish I had known, or ones that I utilised when I first started my business. Specifically a soap and candle business, but it does pertain to specifically just candles or specifically just soap or anything in between. If you're in like the scented realm of like hobbyists to small business to self-employment sort of thing, I think that these will apply to you because they're things that I have personally learned throughout my 3 years of business, or 3 and a bit years now, actually nearly 3.5 years, wow. So yeah, I started Oasis Scents in 2018. The idea came to me kind of in late 2017, early 2018, but we didn't launch the business until August 2018. Months before that though, I spent time watching videos and testing and researching. Looking back now, I think I still needed some more time to test and research, but I felt this pressure to start the business because I spent so much money on learning things, and also because I was studying at the time and I wanted to get it finished or started before I finished university, because I was in my final year of university. So that's why I started it in August after starting to learn things in the December the year before. Here's a few tips and tricks I would tell my past self if I was starting the business now. So personally, I think that you should spend up to 12 months, even 24 months testing your products and learning things and just generally like getting into the rhythm of making things, especially like soaps and candles. Soaps in particular, you shouldn't just use someone else's recipe. You should make a recipe, test it, make another recipe, test it, and try find the one that suits you perfectly. The recipe I use now is probably like my 4th or 5th recipe that I created myself after making like batches of other people's recipes. And the oils I use in my soaps are ones that I personally enjoy using and I think are good and all that stuff. So I spent time doing all this research, but I probably should have spent a bit more time. And I think if you're starting now, you should spend more than 8 months learning. This includes things like timing yourself, how long it takes to make items, because I still don't have that down exactly. I'm still guesstimating most of the time, and I think over time it's becoming more and more true to how long it takes me to make things, especially now that I do bigger batches. But right when you start, you need to just spend so much time testing and learning how to make things and truly falling in love with the products, I think, before you can actually start thinking about selling. Some of the products now that I make I wasn't very good at in 2018, specifically candles, and so I am still getting into the routine of making them really great. I mean, candles now I've got down, but there's some products that I wasn't very good at first, and now I've gotten a lot better. I'm not perfect, no one is, but it's okay to try and try again until you're 100% happy with what you're making. And I think looking back now in August, I wasn't 100% happy with what I was making. Like looking at some of my candles and soaps at the time, like, oh gosh, what was I doing? But now I love everything I create. I mean, there's still a few items I don't love, but I tend to, you know, make it work, and I don't tend to create ugly items nowadays. I've had a few failed things, but not as many as I used to. The next tip would be something I did do, and that is going to a class, and specifically I went to both a soap class and a candle making class. I watched a lot of soap making videos on YouTube for the beginning, from about 2017 in like December until, obviously I still watch them, but it was about 4 months before I made my first batch of soap. I watched videos for 4 months straight, maybe 5 months nearly. And the first batch I made of soap was during a beginner's soap making class run by In My Soap Pot. I will try and remember to leave a link down below to that. If you're in the Auckland area, I would definitely recommend checking out those soap making classes because they're so interesting, and there's 2 different types. There's a beginners and advanced soap class. I've only been to the beginners, but it was definitely worth taking time out of my weekend to go do that. It's unfortunate that New Zealand doesn't have that many soap making classes or even candle making classes out there, but there are some really good ones in Auckland. I think there are ones in Wellington and Christchurch too, but I don't want you to hold that against me because I cannot confirm that. However, if you don't live in Auckland, I currently don't live in Auckland, I would definitely recommend saving up and making the trip up to Auckland to go attend a class if you're wanting to get into soap making, or also if you're wanting to get into candle making. There are some great candle classes in Auckland too, especially the one run by Candle Creations, so I'd recommend checking that one out. Adding to that, I made my first batch and it was kind of terrible of soap like outside of the class, and same with candles. They were just horrible made candles at first. I didn't know what I was doing. Some people seem to think I'm a natural at candle making, because I would say after 3.5 years of making candles non-stop, I have gotten really good at it, but there are still days where my candles just do not fail. The weather right now, summer is not my friend. My house only has one aircon, and this room that I'm in, which is my studio, it gets really hot. So I tend to make candles from like 6 AM until like 10 AM, and then I take a break, and if I want to make any more in the day I make them for like 3 PM onwards. So I have this like break in the middle of the day, like right now today I am taking a break by filming a video. So I definitely had to learn a lot when it came to candle making, and that's why I went to a candle making class. I went to the one at Candle Creations, and I still have the notes from that class in my notebook that I check regularly. It taught me so much about temperature, different waxes, when you do things, how to double boil versus other methods, and all this interesting stuff. And all the information I have there has stayed with me, and so I definitely recommend that if you want to get into candle making, go to a candle making class. Don't just rely on the internet, because also they teach you about what you can and can't put in candles. There are things that are dangerous to put in candles, and they taught me that, which I kind of already knew, but I think someone who's not as aware wouldn't know these things. So I definitely recommend that going to a candle making class run by candle makers is the best way to learn terminology and then learn processes that you'll then keep on as you make candles in a business. The next point I want to make is talking about testing a little bit more. I found out that a lot of people have seen other people's businesses succeeding and doing well and think it's really easy to do, but it's really not. Not to be like a party pooper or anything. When I'm coming out with a new product, I have to test all the things, including the wick, the jar, the burn time. I burn through my entire candle when I'm testing a new jar to 100% make sure that my burn time is accurate, and so I can give my customers an accurate burn time. I also double check like the measurements in the jar. For example, let me find something. These are my 200ml jars, which I'm actually discontinuing, and they are marketed by the manufacturer as a 250ml jar, but the thing is that 250ml includes the up to the very top of this, where you can't actually put a candle around. First of all, it's not very safe, but adding to that, like, I don't know how you'd get the wick in. So I only fill mine up 200ml, and that's why it says, it doesn't say on these anymore, but it used to say 200ml on these. Same with my other ones. They're marketed as something, but they're actually slightly smaller. I just think it's really important to make customers aware of that. Same with my 250ml. They're marketed as 250ml, but they actually do hold 250ml, which is really handy. But for some reason those 250ml, like these ones, only hold 200ml of wax, or 160 grams of wax. So that's something to consider, that I spent a lot of time testing that and keeping that into consideration. I correctly list all the information that it includes a lot of testing and all that information. So if you are looking to start a business, you need to do lots of testing and spend lots of time like getting as much accuracy as you can, because it's really important. Also, if someone calls you out on it, it's a bit awkward. Not that I've been called out on it, but just saying that there's something to keep in mind. Something else also adding to that is that when I was starting my business, one thing I looked at was being unique and trying to stand out. I started it, and there was one other soap and candle, or I think it was just candle company based in New Zealand, who did similar things to me. And so I made sure that everything I did was very different from her, so I didn't step on her toes, and didn't, like, there was no overlap in our business aside from occasionally the same candle names, because we both did like bookish candles, but like my scents were very different from hers, and I tried my best not to do the same scents as her. So then she didn't feel like I was copying her. I think it's really important that you find, when you get this idea of wanting to start a business in this realm, is to try stand out in your own way, and a good way to do that is by testing lots of different jars and trying to find one that you think fits with your brand really well, or testing lots of different scents and trying to find the ones that you think would fit with your brand very well. So anyway, moving on from that, let's talk about something I found very, very helpful, and that was to join some soap and candle groups on Facebook. Facebook is a bit of a dead platform, but the great advice and information that you get from the candle and soap making groups is amazing. I've been given so much insight into different suppliers, different methods, different products I can even make by just joining these groups. One of my favorite ones is Kiwi Soap Makers. All you have to do is search your country and then what thing you want to make. Afterwards, this applies to any hobby. I guess this isn't a hobby for me, but if you're wanting to get into it as a hobby, it applies to any sort of hobby. Is you just search your country and then the thing. Or if you're New Zealand, Kiwi is also a really good thing because Kiwi is what we call ourselves, so Kiwi soap makers is a thing. I think there's a Kiwi candle makers group too, I'm not really sure. So there's some really great ones out there, just search them up on Facebook and then they can just give you so much information about all these things. A tip I had wished I had listened to since the beginning is insurance. This one doesn't exactly apply 100% to New Zealand, but I think it's always a good idea to be as safe as possible. It is something you see a lot of international people talking about, especially those based in the US, but here in New Zealand it is a little bit different. I personally didn't get any insurance for my business until 2019, so a whole year after I started, which is a bit bad because I was also selling candles at the time. Luckily I didn't face any issues because I was very safe anyway, but if someone has a candle and it burns their house down, you can be liable for that. So I think it's really important to get insurance as a business. Also starting a business in general, I didn't register as a business because I was a hobbyist for a long time, so that's another thing to take into consideration. Is if you do want to actually start a business and sell your things, you probably should have an actual business, and you can be a business as like a sole trader or like an incorporation or a limited company. We're a limited company, so it's slightly different. Anyway, not about that, I can't talk much about that side of things, but insurance is something I think is important, and it's something that helps you cover all your bases. For the 2019 and 2020 period, and part of this year in 2021, I think this video will probably go up in 2022 however, I went through the New Zealand Soap Makers Association for my insurance, and looking back now I probably should have gone through myself and talking to an insurance broker just from the beginning, because the NZ SMA does not cover candles and I mainly sell candles. So midway through 2021 I sourced my own insurance. I went through Crombie Lockwood, which is an insurance broker, and that's just because that's what the New Zealand Soap Makers Association also use for their insurance brokerage, and they were able to set me up with the right deal. It was perfect. My insurance costs add up to around $80 per month, which does sound like a lot of money, but in hindsight it's not. It's just worth it. Like, it's just a cost that I factor into everything, and I just think it's really important to get. If you're gonna just be making soaps and other cosmetic items, I definitely recommend just going through the NZ SMA. It's good if you earn under 60k a year, because I think it's maybe 50k is the threshold, but I'm not 100% sure about that anymore because it's been obviously a while since I was with them. But you can go to their website and read more about it, and also if you're part of the NZ SMA you get discounts on some of the big suppliers and you learn more about different suppliers, and there's a newsletter that goes out every month. It's a really good community to be part of, and in general it just gives you a bit more credibility, I think, as a business or a hobbyist soap maker. You're like recognised as this thing by the Soap Makers Association in New Zealand. My final tip for today is to be a bit more aware of your audience and spending more time researching and connecting with your audience, which kind of links back into what I said before about researching similar businesses around you and seeing how you can stand out to be more unique. I started Oasis Scents in 2018, but it wasn't until October 2019 that I finally started to gain some traction, and even then I think in 2019 we're at maybe like 500 followers by the end of the year, which really isn't that much. It took a while to get there, like over a year, and finally in 2020 in November I was able to leave my job, actually October, and do Oasis Scents full time. Part of that was because my job wasn't very good and I wasn't enjoying myself, so I did probably leave a little bit preemptively. However, I live on the same property as my parents, so I get a cheaper rent and stuff, so I could afford to do that. I think if I'd spent more time right from the beginning connecting with local people who were interested in what I had to sell, instead of like focusing solely on friends and family and the only like cosplay community, which is where I started selling, I probably would have been able to do Oasis Scents full time sooner. That is something you have to keep in mind though, is to set realistic goals. Not many businesses blow up and go viral, and many of the ones that do have just started and they've really struggled to keep up with it. So I think it's better to have a slow but organic and steady growth like I have. I mean, I wish in the beginning I'd had a bit more of a fast growth, but I think that it wasn't the worst because also I had a few things going on in my life and I'm not upset at it, and looking back now I'm really happy with where I am. I just wish maybe it'd been a bit faster. That's my last tip. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know. I'm really wanting to do some more business tips and tricks, especially for New Zealand based makers, because I think there's not much out there and everything kind of pertains to overseas countries like the US and Australia and the UK. A few things I'd to mention right away is I don't feel comfortable sharing a lot of my suppliers and things that where I source a lot of stuff, just because there are so many limited options in New Zealand. I think it's really easy to find these things out, and there's just also a few things personally that I don't want to share because of copycats. I'm sorry, I just have to say that right now. Anyway, that's just my personal preference. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you did, please check out our social media and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you all next with the next video, which will probably be a making one. We'll see how I go. Bye!
My love language is your time and attention. Won't you give some of it to me?